Hey everyone, welcome back to Notorious Autosports. This week we are back on Project Zero. And there's going to be a ton of progress. I am super excited. This thing is going to look completely different by the end of this episode.
Yeah.
So if you didn't see my last episode, go back and be sure to check that out because we got this frame rail test fitted in, the floor pan test fitted in, and since then there's been a little bit more that's gone on off camera. I actually have this makeshift tab in for the torque boxes that was completely missing, and I wanted to be able to mount a control arm in there. I didn't go ahead and fully fix that torque box because I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing yet. There was a slice in here that I did go ahead and repair and ground down and got it 95%. Sealed up that slice in there and then made the tab to go along there on the other side of the control arm. There's a couple things I'm going to go over a little later in the video and get your guys' opinion. I'd like to see what you guys think of my different thoughts and approaches or potentials for this thing going on in the future. But today, we're going to go through, I'm going to get the bottom of this thing cleaned up the rest of the way and get it ready to be sealed up, and then going to get that frame rail welded in and the floor pan welded in and get this thing further along than it's ever been since I have ever owned it. It never had a frame rail in it since day one when I got it. It was missing a section out of the center of the floor. Go back and check out one of my other videos. I will explain that in that video as to why that was missing and why this car kind of came to be as it is. And we're going to get stuck into it. Get the bottom of this cleaned up. Get ready to shoot some primer. Alright, so in preparation for the primer, as you can see there's multiple areas that are already covered, but I want to seal the whole bottom of this thing up, not just the spots that have been opened back up. I did go through and I used one of those Worth blue perforated discs, cleaned up all this metal. Just going to give you guys a quick view of how well these blue Worth discs work. So you can see, got our clean section here. That's what it started out as, actually. And I find these things work really well, kind of like a flap disc. Give you a real nice, smooth finish. Really clean the rust up. Awesome here. And then what we'll do is we'll go through afterwards and I'll just put a bit of that POR metal prep on there. That'll take care of any small little spots that are in the pits that I can't quite get at with this disc, but this saves a ton of time and it can actually get into spots where a traditional flap disc can't. So just another thing to add to your toolbox. Use this POR metal prep in certain areas that had a little bit of surface rust, because unfortunately when I got this thing in here I sandblasted all these areas that weren't able to get sandblasted while they were on the pallet before it came home, and then it got set aside. And all this exposed metal, there's not a ton of moisture in here, but there's not constantly heat in the shop, so there was some moisture that developed, and a lot of this just had surface rust on it, so really want to go ahead and clean that off before you end up sealing it in there. This metal prep I showed you in the last video, one thing I did learn on it is you cannot just leave it on. I thought it was like a rust converter, and then I actually read a little more information on it. So it is an acid. You put it on the rust, it does eat away at that rust. And then what you want to do is actually take water, rinse it off, and then make sure you dry that water off real well with compressed air. Otherwise, it will just start rusting again. I thought this metal turning color was indicating that it was kind of doing a rust converting action. It's actually just because it's an acid, it tarnishes the metal. So just something I want to point out. We do have one of my favorite paint prep items here, being the red Scotch pad. There is also gray, which is a little less aggressive, but for primer, this will be perfect. And one key thing that'll help these go further, cut them in half. It gives you twice as many edges and corners, and that way you don't have to spend as much money. Go a lot further. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to scuff all of the primer here, make it so when I recoat it, I'm going to get proper adhesion. And then we'll go through. I got to clean up the shop a little bit more, wet the floors down, and then kind of cover up some stuff because this yellow primer goes absolutely everywhere. Well, got all the scuffing done on that, and I'm happy with how it went. Scotch pads work wonders. You don't have to go too crazy. You're just getting rid of the glaze, giving it something to bond to when you spray whatever you're spraying on top. This primer is Aerospace Epoxy primer, and it sticks to pretty much anything anyways, so that was just an extra ensuring step. Before I go ahead and wipe this all down, one thing I wanted to address was these pinch welds. And this isn't too bad here, but the bottom one, I already went ahead and fixed it, but it was brutal. So before you're gonna go and spray anything, primer, paint, anything like that, go ahead and fix those kind of things. People are jacking the cars up off the pinch welds all the time and destroying them. Jack your car up off the frame rail. It will save those pinch welds so well. Some of these I almost don't want to knock down quite yet because you can see in there, well, might be hard for you guys to see, but inside there is nothing more than just that factory gray type of E-coat in there sealing that. So I kind of want to get some primer in there, but that's a minor spot. Again, this spot's just kind of opened up, not a big deal, but it's when you get it all kinked up and distorted. Go ahead, clean that up, make it look nice, because you'll appreciate it later. All right, on to final prep. And for our last couple things, we are going to do wax and grease remover. Wipe down the whole bottom of the car with shop towels soaked in wax and grease remover. Get rid of any contaminations that might be on there, any last little bit of dirt. And then what works really well actually, as you're wiping, follow behind with a blowgun, and it will actually dry this stuff off and also displace any remaining dust. I've wet the floor down in the shop, and unfortunately it didn't work as good as I had hoped. I needed a whole lot more water because I don't have water out in the shop, so the floor is always dusty, and you can sweep it up and it looks pretty good, but it's funny when you pour water on top of the dust, it just kind of dissipates like water on wax almost. So got a bunch of water down, got everything soaked that way, just took a little more, and that'll keep the dust down. Any dust that's in the air, it will be more likely to drop and get stuck on the floor instead of lingering in the air and getting blown in to the panel with our spray gun. I was wearing these gloves a whole bunch earlier too when I was doing all the scuffing, and it really saves the tips of your fingers when you're jamming into all these sharp edges. You can go a lot quicker and not have to worry about cutting the ends of your fingers open. So just a quick tip for you guys there. And when you are doing this wax and grease remover, turn a fan on, get some ventilation going, wear safety glasses and a mask, because this stuff is pretty nasty and you'll start to actually feel it after a couple minutes. So definitely take the precautions there. Kick the ventilation fan on. If you're painting, you're going to have a fan on anyway, so kick that on and get rid of some of those fumes there. And on the topic of ventilation fan, what I'm actually going to do, I've got a fan propped up in my window in the shop, and to try and trap some of the fumes so that they're not just, the overspray is not being blown right outside, I'm actually just going to take a furnace filter and stick it on the outside of that fan. I've got a box that I've made for my ventilation fan that fits in the window perfectly. So just a couple screws, screw that furnace filter on, and it'll trap a lot of the actual overspray and make things a little nicer outside, that I don't have spray being blown out into anything that's sitting in the yard. So I'm going to go through, wipe the rest of this down with wax and grease remover, get all our primer mixed up, and get ready to spray. Got the shop finished being prepped. Made some curtains on the back wall there, cover my shelves, just try and reduce some overspray. Got everything mixed up. Got a quart of epoxy primer going on there. Got my sweet paint suit on that are always way too short in the legs. Tall guy problems. And heat's been on. Metal's warm. Had the heat pumping because as soon as we get that fan going, it's going to suck it right out. So I'm going to try and well, I've been trying to just get as much heat in here and get the metal as warm as I can to try and help it cure. So nothing to do but get stuck into it and start spraying. There we have it. One midnight primer spraying job complete. This stuff is, the overspray on it's insane. It's just one of those products that seems to get everywhere, and it's bright yellow, so you definitely see all of it, but it works really, really well. As I said earlier, it is Aerospace epoxy primer, so this thing is all sealed up. We're not going to have any moisture getting through to anything, and it's going to be good to be able to sit for a little bit until I get to the next stages of paint and body. I'd like to get some other parts bolted onto it here, maybe make it movable, be pretty cool. But I wanted to circle back around to something that I had mentioned about this rear suspension area and how I wasn't sure about this torque box and everything. Originally when I started this car, I was kind of going for an OEM plus look, and I had the thought I'd just fix that torque box weld it back up, and put it back in. But lately I've been thinking that I'm probably never going to be quite happy with that. It's not bad. I must say, for the quick job that I did on it, it actually turned out really well, and I could probably do something that I'd be happy with, but just not too sure. I'd have to put torque box reinforcements in that, and by the time I do that, I could cut those out, put some Team Z weld together torque boxes in there, and probably have a nicer finished product at the end. The goal for this car has always been to have a Detch kit and be on air ride. But I have been contemplating lately about doing mini tubs, because a 255 on air ride just, it's alright, but a 315 or a 325 on air ride would be pretty awesome. So I'm thinking about doing mini tubs on it, in which case the rear suspension changes because it actually gets rid of that whole upper shock mount unless you cut the tub and cut the floor and shift all of it in accordingly. There is Detroit Speed. They have a really nice OEM style mini tub, but it does delete that shock mount, and then you actually use a hole in the frame rail, which is this one here, and they give you an upper shock mount that goes into there. You enlarge it, a spherical mount there, but that would change suspension altogether. So we wouldn't be using a traditional rear airbag or air spring. So let me know what you guys think. I got a couple different ideas. I could do the Detroit Speed, try and find a different air strut or air shock for the back there to fit with that. I'd just have to be shorter. Or try and cut that tub and integrate a factory upper shock mount and use a Ride Tech air strut back there. Because once you cut these in further, you basically lose the upper spring perch. So I can't use a typical Ride Tech air spring in the back there in the factory location. So let me know what you guys think. Throw some comments down below. Appreciate you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. Project Zero has come a long way in just a couple days. Stay tuned for the future progress, because it's still going to be crazy in a very, very short period of time. Thanks for watching.